Assault tanks are part of Battlefront's post-war expansion for late War Leviathans and Clash of Steel. I've already reviewed the US T-28 Super Heavy Assault Tank, and this time it's the turn of the British with the A39 Tortoise. Join me for a look at this lumbering great super heavy tank. This is CSB01, the British Tortoise Assault Troop for Clash of Steel and Flames of War. Tortoise is a British heavy assault tank with a big gun and thick armour, designed for assaulting fixed fortifications. The box is for Clash of Steel, but late War Leviathans also lets you field these in Flames of War. Tortoise even get their own assault squadron list. Let's look at some history. A39 Tortoise was designed in response to a 1943 requirement for an assault tank to breach heavily fortified positions like the Siegfried Line. Mobility was secondary to armour and firepower in the assault role, so A39 had thick armour and a powerful gun, but at 80 tons was extremely slow. Main armament was a 32-pounder gun, a 94mm weapon with 2 loaders to handle the 2-part ammunition, with separate propelling charge and projectile. This gun was mounted in a heavily armoured casemate, both to handle the heavy recoil forces and to avoid any of the weaknesses in a turreted design. Lack of a traversing turret and slow speed were not considered limitations for a vehicle designed to target stationary bunkers. Crew was 7 men, a commander, gunner, 2 loaders, 2 machine gunners and a driver. The machine gunners operated Beza machine guns, 2 guns mounted in a rotating turret on the casemate roof, and 1 mounted high on the left of the casemate front. 25 A39s were ordered, but by the end of the war only 6 prototypes had been produced. Post-war testing found Tortoise reliable and a good stable gun platform, but it was too slow and heavy and difficult to transport. One is preserved at the Bovington Tank Museum, while the others were used as range targets and destroyed. This one remains at the Kirkcudbright training area in Scotland. This is just a quick history. If you want a deep dive into the development of the A39 Tortoise, I recommend checking out the Armoured Archives videos on the subject. Links in the description below. If we look at the back of the box, there's a scale image of a completed and painted kit, as well as a promo image of 2 more in action. There's no exploded assembly diagram as is common on Flames of War boxes. A separate black and white printed instruction sheet is included instead, but assembly is pretty straightforward. Let's look at the plastic. Tortoise comes on 2 sprues of medium green plastic. One has the upper, lower, front and rear hull plates and the machine gun turret. The other has the 2 hull sides, the tracks, engine deck, gun and hatches. All the parts are well detailed and moulding is generally nice, although there is some minor flash to clean up, unusual in a new mould. The hull is engineered as multiple interlocking sections. Spoiler alert, it needs about 6 hands to get all the parts together and pegs to hold everything and avoid gaps. The upper hull captures the odd shape of the hull casting. There's enough detail here, and a hole for the open or closed commander's hatch. This hole is keyed so the hatch sits right. There's also a mounting for the machine gun turret. This is keyed too, but I'm not sure why because the turret piece that fits on here isn't. The gun travel lock for the massive 32-pounder gun is moulded onto the front glacis. The engine deck is a separate piece that glues into this big hole at the back. The lower hull piece includes parts of the suspension. It's keyed, but the keying is the same on both sides. You'll need to dry fit this to make sure you get it right, but I think it won't go together the wrong way. The key, if you'll pardon the pun, is these pegs that interlock with the suspension on the hull side parts. The front and rear hull are separate pieces, moulded integral with sections of the wide track run. This front piece has a curved heavy cast shape, with 3 prominent heavy towing eyes. The track portions fit up under the fenders when you fit it to the upper hull, covering the join nicely. There's some flash here on the upper edge where it meets the hull on my example. This proved hard to clean up without bumping into some of the detail. The rear part is more complex, with fenders and more towing eyes. There also appears to be an access hatch, towing hooks, and what looks like a pair of methyl bromide fire extinguishers. The top of this piece has an indent that interlocks with the exhaust system on the engine deck. I had some fit issues and flash on this piece too. It took some dry fitting and sanding to get it to sit properly flush against the upper hull. Fairly simply sorted out, but just be aware of it. The tight tolerances here might push the upper hull parts out of alignment if you don't check this before assembly. The main gun, a jerry can, and the MG turret round out the parts. The turret goes on the upper hull and mounts a pair of Beza 7.92mm machine guns. The main gun is the 94mm ordnance quick-firing 32-pounder gun. This was a hard-hitting, heavy gun with good ballistics and penetration. This gun was intended as a replacement for the 17-pounder gun, but post-war the 20-pounder gun was adopted instead. Tortoise was the only AFE armed with this gun, although one was trialled on a wheeled carriage as an anti-tank gun, and one was even fitted to a Mosquito fighter bomber. 2 loaders were utilised to handle the 2-part ammunition. The 2 hull side pieces include the side skirts, suspension, hull and casemate sides. The engineering for these interlocks all the hull parts. After building one, I'd suggest gluing the left side to the lower hull, slotting on the upper hull, and then sliding in the right side hull piece. Plenty of pegs were used to hold the parts in place while the glue dried to avoid gaps. Detail on these parts includes stowed extra track links, plus an ammunition loading hatch on the left. Banks of smoke discharges are moulded on too. The track parts only model the lower portion of the run. This follows the pattern for these big tanks of separate track parts. These will fit onto the track pieces moulded onto the front and rear hull sections. Some nice engineering here lets the track slip under the links on the front piece, minimising join lines. Great work by the design team. There's plenty of strong track detail here, showing the characteristic British post-war bar-type manganese steel design. These look great. The gun mantlet is a circular piece, rounded for good shot deflection. It's thick, with heavy bolt detail reflecting the vaguely steampunk industrial design aesthetic of the whole vehicle. Next to that is a Beza machine gun for the front plate of the casemate. This piece fits into a recess on the hull and has a nice curved edge that makes sure you position it correctly. Optional commander's hatches let you choose an open hatch to add a crew figure, or a closed version to model the tank buttoned up. I did notice in this clash of steel boxing there are no crew figures supplied, so you'll need to source these from one of your starter boxes or your bits box. Lastly, we come to the engine deck. This fits onto the hole on the back of the upper hull piece. As well as engine access hatches, this piece includes the exhaust, with a single post-war style fishtail exhaust mounted centrally. There's lots of nice detail here. The angle of the part doesn't quite match the angle of the hull piece, so use plenty of glue and be ready to apply some pressure until it dries in place. Not a big issue, just something to be aware of. So that's the parts for the A39 Tortoise Heavy Assault Tank. Overall, there's some very clever engineering on display here. Lots of nice little touches that make for a good result. However, the multi-part hull needs plenty of dry fitting and clamping to end up with a gap-free build. Plus I was surprised to see some flash on a new mould. Nothing serious, but the front and rear hull pieces need some clean-up to fit properly. But that's just minor stuff. This all goes together into a nice miniature of this weird, heavy British vehicle. Okay, so we've built our Tortoise. How's it going to go on the table? I'm going to look at the Flames of War stats in the late War Leviathans book. Tortoise is a tank unit with a confident 4+ for motivation. This is a 5+ for counterattack due to the SP gun rule. Frankly, I'm not sure that I buy that with how many machine guns Tortoise has, but it's not designed for close combat with infantry. It should have its own support infantry to stop enemy getting that close. Protected ammo gives it a solid 3+ remount, so these crews should get back in okay if Tortoise is bailed. Skill level is a 4+ trained, again with a 5+ for assault. Tortoise crews are careful, hit on a 4+. Armour is a stonking 21 on the front, 11 on the side and 2 on top. This thing has as much side armour as a Churchill gets on the front, a real challenge for anything other than the heaviest Napkenwaffe vehicles to penetrate. But Tortoise's enemies could just run away. With a tactical move of just 8 inches or 20 centimetres, Tortoise isn't going to catch them up. Even the road dash is just 12 inches or 30 centimetres. This thing is well named as it plods ponderously across the table. But the 32-pounder gun reaches out 40 inches or 100 centimetres, so maybe the slow speed isn't that much of an issue. Halted rate of fire is 2 and moving of 1, with an anti-tank of 18 and a 3+ firepower. As you might expect from a casemate-mounted gun, it gets the forward firing rule. This means targets must be fully in front of the vehicle to be engaged. AT-18 is nice, but not enough to penetrate Mouse or E100, and even only marginal against Tiger too. And trying to manoeuvre Tortoise around for a side shot will be a race between getting into position and the enemy dying of old age before you get there. You do get 5 shots for the machine guns with all those Beezers, so you can bring some hurt to the infantry. Just don't get close enough to be assaulted. The Leviathans Tortoise Assault Squadron can field a mix of Tortoise and Churchills, with Chaffee Recon and Crusader AA in support. HQ is 1 or 2 tanks, and troops are 2 or 3. Tortoise clocks in at about 15 points each. So that's Tortoise. Heavy armour and a big gun, but slow. While the 21 front armour will shrug off most enemy guns, the AT-18 gun is going to struggle against some of the other super heavies in the game, and its slow speed will make manoeuvring for a side shot difficult. These might be a good unit to spring from ambush into somebody's flank, but at 15 points each, that's a costly ambush. The kit is fun. While I mentioned some flash and had a chuckle at the gymnastics required to get all the interlocking hull pieces interlocked, this is a well-engineered and thoughtfully designed kit, one I'm happy to have had the chance to build. But is it going to work for you? Are you keen to build and play the A39? Do you think Tortoise is worth the points? And how do you plan to deal with any super heavies it might come up against? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you next time.